Good morning and welcome to another episode of Gone Fishing here on the 5 Reasons Sports Podcast Network. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe at the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel where we post all of these videos as well as other videos. You have the Dolphins and what they're doing in camp this year. You have the Heat and their pursuit of Dame still going on. Inter Miami and Messi Mania in South Florida. And we've got the Marlins covered as well as the Hurricanes, who are also starting up their season shortly. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe, get up on all of the latest in South Florida sports by keeping in touch with the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. But going further here, it is August 14th, 2023. The Miami Marlins are 62-57, sitting in that last wild card spot in the National League. They went 4-2 this week. Couple of back-to-back series wins, really pivotal ones considering kind of the trajectory that they had been on prior to this week and where they are now. Not to say that they're fully back, but they have pulled up out of that nosedive quite a bit, pretty nicely here. So I want to get into the players of the week right away, and I'm going to start at the minor league level. I really wanted to find another hitter in the system, particularly at the lower levels, that I could talk about rather than propping up a guy that's been discussed ad nauseum this year. But I just can't ignore what Troy Johnston has done of late in AAA. For the week, he's hitting .400, getting on base at a .500 clip, slugging .700 for an OPS of .1,200, 2 home runs, and 10 runs batted in 5 games. Also became the first player in minor league baseball this year with 100 runs batted in. So Johnston is just dominating AAA at the moment. He was really good in AA. This is his second go around in AAA. Last year he struggled, but it seems like he's really, really just kind of found it at that level this year, hitting well over .400 in his time in Jacksonville thus far. So it'll be fun to see, when and how they can incorporate him into the major league roster. Whether or not that's just something that we have to wait for September for, which I think it will be. And then potentially next year, him stepping in as, perhaps your first baseman of the future, or your guy that kind of platoons with Josh Bell if Jorge Soler does indeed walk. But enough about that. Let's get into the minor league pitcher of the week. And I'm going to put parentheses around minor league because really we all know that this guy is a major league pitcher and can pitch at the big league level and be really good when he's right. And it's Edward Cabrera. Eddie, 6 innings, 1 hit, 2 walks, 11 strikeouts. This was really, really encouraging stuff for Cabrera. 2 walks, 11 strikeouts, 5.5 strikeout to walk ratio. It's kind of what you want to see from him. Obviously, you want to see maybe a little bit more, so maybe he gets 1 or 2 more starts at that level. And if he continues pitching the way that he has in his first 2 starts at AAA, I would imagine he gets that call very quickly, especially if the team does not want to burn out his minor league options, which I can tell you for a fact that I know that they don't. And then additionally, we're looking at where does Eddie fit in once he gets back? Is that going to be something that, do you move Cueto to the bullpen? Does Eddie come back in a bullpen role? Do you move Yuri to the bullpen even? If you want to have like a dynamite back end of the pen right-handed arm, because quite frankly, right now it doesn't seem like they have that. We know Brazaban's not going to be that guy, and Robertson is that guy, but he's also your closer. I mean, a guy that can come in the 7th, 8th inning in a really high leverage spot in a close game. That's not necessarily a save situation because you don't want to burn Robertson outside of the 9th. And Perez or even Cabrera could really be that guy in a pinch if need be, I think, for this team. So I think it's a good development to see Cabrera pitching as well as he has of late. And it's something that shows that, that there can be, some reinforcements coming in and some of that starting pitching depth really starting to solidify itself. And on the Major League roster now, your Major League Player of the Week is going to be Jake Burger's .440 average over his last 6 games, 4 doubles, and he has been much better than advertised at third base, at least I think. And I don't know, maybe I'm just grading on a curve because the defense that we've seen at that position all year long really hasn't been very good. But Berger's been a really welcome surprise. Like I mentioned, he's hitting 440. He's striking out almost half as many times, or at half the rate that he was in Chicago so far in his Marlins tenure. And I don't think that that's necessarily going to continue, but I do think that there might be something to a little bit of a rejuvenation for Jake Berger, kind of being in a better clubhouse situation than what was going on there in Chicago, in a little bit more of a tight knit clubhouse, maybe just having a little bit more fun playing baseball right now than he had been previously in the season. And then your pitcher of the week at the major league level, is there any other answer than Sandy Alcantara? There's just not. He took the ball in what was at the time probably one of the bigger games of the season, because the Marlins had lost a game where they had Luzardo going against the bullpen day for the Yankees. So I think going into the Yankee series, everybody looked at it and they were kind of saying to themselves, well, the Marlins really have to take the first two, especially if the Yankees are going to be trotting out, TBAs on the mound and having a bullpen day, back-to-back games. And then, you've got Yuri versus Cole, and I know we all love Yuri, but Garrett Cole is another monster altogether. But the Marlins, kind of unexpectedly, they lose that first game, and then all the pressure's on Sandy because everybody's thinking, kind of going into Sunday's game with Cole on the mound, that the Marlins offense just probably won't be able to get it done. So, I think a lot of Marlins fans are looking at that and saying, well, if they lose Saturday, they likely get swept by the Yankees, which would have been a disastrous result for this team. It would have been arguably a season-ending result. It would have been that kind of it would have been that damaging for the Marlins. But Sandy goes out there, in one of the most electric environments you're going to see at Lone Depot this year. That entire series, breaking 100,000 was fantastic. And he puts on a show, goes 9 innings, allows just 1 run, a run that should have never even been allowed after he got hosed by the umpires all day on Saturday, from strike 3 being a ball to that leading to a walk to the balk, and then that run scoring. You thought maybe Sandy wouldn't be able to get through the entire game, but he was at 104 pitches through 8, and he pretty much told Skip, "There's no way I'm coming out of this game." And then he finds a way to finish it off, and he just shows off that even in a down year, he's still that alpha on the mound for this team. He's still the ace. And now that's 3 out of the last 4 games for Sandy where he's gone, at least 8 innings. And that's another thing that I want to touch on with this team, and Sandy kind of coming back into form to lead the rotation, especially right now when you see a guy like Luzardo kind of scuffling over his last few starts. Yuri may be shaking off a little bit of the rust since he's returned. But I cannot say enough good things about Sandy so far in the second half. He's been what we thought, or closer to what we thought he would be. All year long. I don't think anybody even expected him to be, nobody expected him to be the guy that he's been the last 2-3 weeks over the entire course of the season. I think that would be silly to expect something like that out of him again, because of how really historic his last year felt. But he's kind of at that level right now over his last 3 or 4 starts. Over his last 5, he's pitched to a 2.37 ERA, 38 innings over his last 5 starts. So he's going like 7.6 innings per start, which is just ridiculous stuff for him. But it's stuff that we know that he's capable of. Cannot emphasize enough how good Sandy has been. But going back, so as we mentioned, 4-2 week for the Marlins. It's been pretty successful. They've got a really tough schedule here versus the Astros for 3. And they're going to have Garrett, Cueto, and Luzardo going on the mound and the Astros are going to be trotting out Christian Javier, Framber Valdez, and Justin Verlander. So on paper, the Astros have the pitching advantage all throughout this series. On paper, they have the advantage in the lineup as well. But there are some things that I saw in the last week or so that kind of make me think that maybe the Marlins mojo, that luck that they had in the first half is starting to come back. I think the game on Sunday really embodied a lot of, it was a very first half-esque win. The Marlins were getting they were getting beat really badly. It was 7-1. You were thinking, okay, well, the Marlins are just going to get blown out today. This one's going to be a laugher. They get a couple of runs, in the late innings, make it 7-3 headed into the nines. But I think what really settled it for me was that tapper that Josh Bell hit back to the mound. The pitcher couldn't field it cleanly, but Josh Bell's not super fleet of foot, so a good throw probably gets Bell. But he compounds his error by throwing the ball past the first baseman. 2 runs come in to score, 7-5. Luis Arraez then hits the triple, and Jake Berger sends everyone home after De La Cruz walks. So a very first half-esque win there for the Marlins. The bullpen has been really good over the last week again, minus Huascar Brazovan. I've liked Jorge Lopez over the last week. I've liked David Robertson over the last week. He's getting the 2 back-to-back saves. AJ Puck has looked a lot better over the last week or two since he's really started to struggle, around about June or so this year. But he looks like he's starting to get back on track. Andrew Nardi has really not missed a beat for this team. And then you've still got Steven Okert, Tanner Scott having really good years. So I think that the bullpen is maybe 1 or 2 tweaks away from kind of being back to where it was in the first half, which I think is going to be something that this team needs going forward here to really make things happen. And then additionally, I think the other thing that has to be talked about, because over the last week, there's been changes to the lineup made and tweaks made and switching things up, maybe move Arraez to the 2 spot, maybe move him to the 3 spot, Bell at the 2 spot. And it's the one spot in the order that the Marlins have yet to figure out is the leadoff guy, and it's one of the leading questions for the Marlins right now. No pun intended. Actually, it was intended. But going back to that leadoff spot, Skip tried Jazz there for the Yankee series, and that was not good. The Jazz experience at leadoff was one that I think we can probably put behind us at this point. I wouldn't mind seeing kind of a modified version of what we saw with Arraez batting 3 and Bell batting 2. I like Bell as a 2-hitter. I think his walk rate is high enough. He doesn't really strike out a ton, even though he struck out more with the Marlins than he did with the Guardians this year. But Bell's been so productive that it doesn't really matter to me at this point. I think maybe moving Jazz into that 3 spot and then moving Arraez back to 1, because Arraez was really good in that leadoff spot, and then they moved him to 2, and for whatever reason, he was just unable to get going. And maybe it's just a coincidence that his slump was kind of happening through that 2 spot. But he just didn't look real comfortable up there at that time. Much better in the 1 spot, much better in the 3 spot since he's been moved there. He had a big game yesterday, the 3 hits. Obviously the game tying triple the other day, and the home run that he had hit Friday night, his longest of his career, going 409 feet. But I would probably go back to Arraez in the 1 spot, and then maybe Bell at 2, Jazz 3, and Soler 4. I think that probably makes the most sense to me if you want to kind of keep some of the changes that you've made to this order, and you want to kind of make it work. And then additionally, the other thing that I think is going to have to happen here going forward is you've got to get a couple of guys hot at the same time. You've got it right now with Bell and Berger, and I think that those guys have kind of been carrying the offensive load a little bit of late. Even the thing about Josh Bell is even when he's not like overtly productive, he's still giving you really good at bats. He's still working counts. He's still drawing walks, getting on base, doing everything that he has to kind of keep the lineup moving, to keep things going. And that's the one thing that I think I've appreciated most about Josh Bell so far. And Jake Berger's kind of been, the same way to this point. Early on in his Marlins tenure, the first 3 or 4 games, maybe he was struggling a little bit, but he's really caught on really, really nicely. You see the power, the exit velocities on the stuff that he hits is just ridiculous. But outside of Bell and Berger right now, you don't have a ton of guys that are hitting well at the same time. Arise, obviously, he had his 3-hit game, but for the most part, he had been struggling previous to that. Jazz is really struggling right now, probably related to hitting in that one hole. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him start hitting again when he is moved to a different spot in the order. Joey Wendell's been okay of late. I still think that this team ought to consider seeing what they have at shortstop organizationally. My stance on Xavier Edwards has not changed, probably won't change, but it's been consistent all throughout the year. I'm not overly at short. I think he needs to be playing the position in AAA to get better at it, and potentially be an answer here, because I think he would be the perfect. I mean, he went 1-for-1 yesterday at AAA, and he drew 4 walks, 1-for-1 with 4 walks. And I know that AAA pitching is AAA pitching for a reason, and control issues can be part of that. But still, if a guy's, you've got guys at the major league level that can't draw 4 walks in a AAA game because they've just got too much swing and miss and too much chase in their game. And I think Edwards would be, if he were up here, he would be the ideal number 1 or 2 hitter, however you want to pair that up with Arise, I think would be ideal for this ball club. But I think that's something that ultimately we won't get to see until September at this point. I think that much is very clear. And there's only a couple of weeks till September call-ups anyways at this point. But that leadoff spot is something that I want to see addressed. The other bats kind of have to get it going. Same thing I've said about Bell has kind of been true about Jacob Stallings of late. He just pushes the lineup forward. He draws walks way more than a Nick Fortes has. And Nick Fortes is a player that, if you would have asked me maybe 2 or 3 months ago, who on the Marlins or out of the Marlins catchers, who would I like to see on this roster going forward in the next year, I would have said Nick Fortes. But I'm not so certain of that answer anymore. I think if there is a move in the offseason and the Marlins upgrade at catcher, I think Jacob Stallings ends up, kind of fitting into that backup catcher role because of the fact that he does a lot of the little things, well as a baseball player, even for his obvious defects. He can't really throw out runners anymore. But he calls a much better game than Fortes does. And he puts together competitive at-bats. And Fortes, to his credit, Fortes had a big part in that fourth quarter, or in that 9th inning rally last night, the infield single. And that's not to say that I think that he's an irredeemably bad player. Just at the moment, Stallings has been doing a little bit better than him. But going forward, I do think that the Marlins will have to figure out that leadoff spot. As I mentioned, the bullpen has been better of late. And then starting pitching, it's going to have to, your starting pitching right now is really going to depend on Jesus Luzardo. He's hit a career high in innings to this point. So he's kind of in uncharted territory for himself. Is he tiring out? Is that what's causing this little downside? Is he fatigued? Is he exhausted? Maybe. But the Marlins are going to need him to figure something out down the stretch. Braxton Garrett has started to pitch a little bit better after his doldrums. So if he can figure it out, he can be a big part of this rotation. Because I'm counting Sandy as revitalized. I think Sandy, while he might not be 2022 Sandy, for the rest of the way out, I think he's going to be a lot closer to that than what we saw in the first half. Jesus Luzardo's got to turn things around. Braxton Garrett's starting to turn things around. I think Cueto's going to be a consistent, solid innings eater. Although that the home run is just going to be what ends up hurting him a lot because of the fact the stuff isn't really electric, and he just has to be so precise with everything that he does. And then with Yuri, you just hope hey, listen, there were a lot of people in that stadium. Yuri's a young pitcher. I think he'll be fine ultimately, but he is still shaking off a little bit of that rust from his time off. I think as you get further separated from that, he'll get better as the season goes on, particularly into September. And then Edward Cabrera, as I mentioned, earlier in the show, I think is a wild card for this team. If he comes back in the rotation, if he comes back in the bullpen. But things do seem to be starting to trend in the positive direction for the Marlins. The pitching performances are getting a little bit better. The bullpen is starting to stabilize. You're starting to see maybe an avenue for that formula in the first half to come back, where the Marlins are keeping teams close and then executing late because the bullpen is keeping them in games. They've gotten a lot healthier in that bullpen. So they're in a good position right now to make things happen. It's all out in front of them. They're still in that wild card spot. The teams around them have started to really slump. The Reds are really slumping. The Giants lost their series to the Rangers. The Cubs have started to slow a little bit from where they were maybe a week ago. So it's all out in front of them with the Marlins. The starting pitching is starting to improve with Sandy's reemergence. The bullpen is starting to get their footing again. The lineup has been better, although I still want to see them do something about that leadoff spot and really, really, really try to figure that out, because I think that's kind of the missing piece with this offense. If you find somebody in that leadoff spot that can be productive, because it's been the middle of the order of late that's really been carrying them through this, whether it's Bell or Berger, the odd hit from Jesus Sanchez. So I think that they're close. They're really, really, really close to being able to make a run. We'll see what happens in this series against the Astros. I will admit that there is definitely a paper advantage to the Astros in all three matchups. But the Marlins are going to have to keep themselves into games in order to let the bullpen come in, keep them close, and ultimately, hopefully, try to get through this one unscathed. You hope to win 2 out of 3 in every series and win the series. But I think realistically, if I had to make a prediction right now, I think it goes 1-2 Houston. And then for your prize picks pick of the day, I am actually going to go with, let's see here. I'm going to go with the lefty on the mound, Framber Valdez. I think Jorge Soler makes his return to the lineup, and I think he has a pretty solid game for your Miami Marlins. So I would take his over on hits, runs, and RBIs combined at 1.5. I think he will get a couple of hits, maybe an RBI here. But I think Soler obviously matches lefties. So he will hope to make a difference for the Miami Marlins tonight. And that is it for your Gone Fishing weekly roundup for the Fish. We will see you guys next time. So be sure to keep watching. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on right now in the world of the Marlins, and hopefully a playoff run is in the cards. But we will have it covered for you every Monday here on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.